This is Love Intervention. I'm Pastor Evans.
I'm Mrs. Evans.
Glad you joined us today. We've been gone for a little while, but we're back.
We're back.
And today we're talking about communication and love. Communication and love. That's what we're talking about. What you think?
I love communication and love.
You tripping. So, in the first part of our marriage, we had a little bit of an issue with communication, right? So, you're gonna do all that? A little bit of an issue with communication.
A whole lot of bit of issue.
Yeah. So we got married in 1999. If you
Ooh.
follow our story at all, got married back in the 1900s.
Right,
And-
the 1900s.
But
When did your story begin in the 1900s?
You're ridiculous. So we talked before about the first 5 years of our marriage in previous episodes. You can go listen to those or go watch those if you're on YouTube. But today we're going to start right around in year 5, going into year 6, when we moved from our home in Long Beach, our apartment rather, in Long Beach. So we moved away from everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a time where we weren't near my family, we weren't near her family, and it was just us.
It was just us.
Yeah. It
No
was really
kids.
No kids yet. But that was really the first part of our marriage where it was just us,
Right,
for the most part.
for the most part.
Yeah. In later videos, we'll talk about when it wasn't us again, but it was just us. So
Right.
we had a lot of time to talk
Right.
and try to communicate and sup with each other.
It's really important that couples, when you move together after being married, that you move as far away as you can from in-laws or other members of your family. Like, I know a lot of times people move in with their mother, they move in with their father to save money, but it's going to be really important for your marriage that you are putting yourself in a position where there's no one else there, no
Right.
one else to give input, no one else to, be on your side, be on his side, so that you're forced into communicating, so that you learn how to communicate together. Because if you're not forced in a position where now I have to deal with the way you communicate, you have to deal with the way I communicate, then we can avoid situations or we can get other people on our side. And that could really interfere with your marriage growing
Right.
and prospering, becoming something that you can be proud of.
Right.
So that was the lesson that I learned.
Okay. All right. Yeah, the Bible says to leave and cleave, right? You leave your mother and your father's home if you
Yeah.
can. But the Bible says, doesn't say if you can. But the Bible says you should leave and your home and your surroundings and cleave to your own spouse.
Right.
So that idea or that understanding or that instruction from God is important so
Yeah.
that you can grow
Right.
and figure out what this life is like. Because ultimately there's only 3 people in your marriage, the 2 of you and God. So that's who you need to communicate with. And if you're too close, then like you said, you start asking people for opinions. So move as far away as possible. Is what
Far away as possible.
as far away as safely possible. Maybe,
Right.
Maybe you need some
Right.
support.
There's nothing wrong with living in the same city.
Right.
But if you can, because sometimes you have to move in with your in-laws to save enough money so that you can buy that house or get that apartment. I understand that completely. And a lot of people do. However, when you do that, you have to know, and you got to put people on notice, like, this is my marriage.
Right.
Please stay out of it as much as possible.
Right.
Right.
So this is about year 5 or so. We really kind of got into dealing with some of our communication issues and some of the issues that we had with understanding how to love each other. One of the things that I think was hard for me
Okay.
was the way that you communicated. I think we may have talked about this before, and maybe you guys remember, maybe you don't, but it was just, my wife is very direct. There's not a whole lot of like trying to figure out what she said,
Right.
right? So it's very like, and I wasn't used to that, right? So she would say stuff and I'd be like, why are you yelling at me?
First of all, I didn't get the filter with the marriage license.
Right.
I told you.
Right, I got you.
Okay. Second of all, I wasn't like, boom, boom, boom.
Well, I wasn't saying you was hitting me. I was saying you was like
I'm not
very
saying-
like the way
I
it
was
was just
clear.
like
I spoke clearly,
right.
with intention,
Yes.
exactly
Yes.
about what I was feeling
Uh-huh.
in language that was clear.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
I think what was interesting was that
Because
were-
you speak in beat around the bush terms, okay? He'd be
Listen.
like, let me go around this one. How about go around this one?
right.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But I think the difference is that you're direct is maybe the best word I can use, but it's like sometimes it sounds harsh,
Okay.
right? And it took me a little while to learn that she wasn't attempting to be harsh, but it sounded harsh.
But
just
it was
because of
spirit and truth.
Right. I understand. See, but that's the thing, right? I try to figure out how to say things, with like mittens.
Okay. We are adults.
We're different.
Right.
So we're different. So I try to mitten my words.
Right.
Yeah, your words got hammers.
Right. So during that time, I'm communicating the best that I can.
Yes.
And you're communicating the best that you can.
Right.
But it feels like you're treating me like one of the kids at school
Right.
because you got mittens on. And I'm like, what is wrong
Yeah.
with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for us, and probably for a lot of you guys, the communication style can be a challenge.
Right. And so along with working on communication styles and learning each individual's communication style, we also had to get more in tune about how one another received love. Earlier, I think season 2, we talked about love languages.
Right.
We had to really look at the different kinds of love languages and examine or try to come to a conclusion on how each person needed to be loved so that they could feel loved. And we didn't necessarily use the proper names for it,
Okay.
but we did have to determine like, okay, this is how I like to be loved, but he may not like to be loved this way. And then having conversations, working on communication again about how he received love and how I received love, and just how important communication and accepting the fact that my spouse may not want to be loved the way that I want to be loved. And so we really worked on that during that time.
Yeah, we've talked before about the first 5 or so years of our marriage being pretty tough. And so this was some of the things that we were going through. And you might be going through too in your marriage, or you may go through once you get married. And don't be surprised, like trying to figure out how to communicate with your wife, trying to figure out how to communicate with your husband, trying to figure out why doesn't she think it's loving when I bring her stuff.
Right.
Right. And I'm thinking about her, but I'm bringing her stuff and she's like, oh, this is nice. But that's not necessarily how she received love.
Right.
And trying to figure out why is it that if I wash dishes, she gets so excited.
Right. Because
Right.
sometimes gifts isn't the person's love language.
Right.
Sometimes acts of service is.
Yeah.
And so
So we're figuring all that stuff out.
Right.
And we worked through that stuff. And we're still, I'm still making sure that I communicate love in a way that can be received.
yeah, but he wants me to say, you're getting better.
I do, because I like to hear it. Because
Getting
one of my
better.
love languages is words of affirmation.
Right.
So
Ooh, he greedy too.
that's fine. Am I getting better or not?
You're greedy.
Just say it on the
You're
video.
getting better.
And see, this with this. All right. so some of the things that we learned, figuring out our communication styles and figuring out how to love each other were. You want to do yours first?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll do mine first.
Yeah.
So, first lesson is you don't always hear what you think you heard.
Right.
Right? I learned that's meaning when your partner or your spouse is talking to you, make sure you hear what you think you heard. Because sometimes we feel a certain way, and like with my wife, she was saying things in a way that I wasn't used to, so it's kind of harsh. For me, it was harsh. So I reacted to how I felt,
Okay.
not what I heard, right? Not the words that I heard. I reacted to the way that you said it, and that doesn't help, right?
Right.
Because that can cause issues. So That was my first lesson. You don't always hear what you think you heard. And on the other side of that is you don't always say what you think you said.
Right.
So there was times that I was saying, oh, I thought I told you this, or I thought you understood that. And I wasn't communicating in a way because I guess my mittens were,
because
were
I needed you
drowning
to
out.
communicate clearly.
Right.
Like, the sky is green.
Right.
But you would be like, well, it's not blue.
No, I would say more
And
like,
it's not yellow.
you know what? The sky is a combination of like yellow and blue. So that can be green if you accept that. So you in my lesson though. The lesson,
Okay.
you don't always say what you think you said. Try to be as clear as possible.
Right.
That's my struggle with being clear with my wife. I feel like I'm clear with most other people.
Clear as mud.
That's fine. I feel like I'm clear with most other people in most other situations, but being clear with my wife, I have to work on that. And then my last one regarding love and just understanding love and love languages is that love ain't love unless the someone you're trying to love interprets it as love. That's a lot of words.
Right.
But if I'm loving you, it is love. Like me bringing my wife flowers and balloons and stuff like that is love for me.
Right.
And it's done from love. But if she doesn't understand it to be love, then it doesn't feel like love.
Especially if I don't like flowers.
Right.
So now you're trying to be loving, bringing me something that I don't like.
Right. And I think a lot of people get into arguments because of that. A lot of people in their marriages, a lot of people in their relationships, and you might have gotten into an argument about that. But just giving someone something or trying to do something that's loving in your mind
Right.
doesn't make it love for them.
Right.
They may even recognize. I think my wife recognized that it was done from a place of love,
Right.
but it didn't feel like I was loving her because I didn't love her in a way that made her feel loved.
And then you didn't feel appreciated.
Right.
Because I was like, why would you bring me these flowers that are going to die?
Right. So those are my lessons.
Yeah.
Love people the way that they feel love.
So the lessons that I learned, which my husband already said, but let me say it better, is that it's really important that you learn your significant other's way to communicate, their communication style. There's no other way around it. You can't change the other person. That other person can adapt their communication style if they choose, but you as one individual can't change your spouse. And for the most part, I don't think you really want to because you fell in love with that person. And so it's really important that you sit down, pay attention, and just learn the way that they communicate and figure out how you can adapt the way you communicate or how you'll communicate with them. So like maybe you might keep communicating the way you communicate normally with others, and then you choose a different communication style when you're communicating with your spouse. So a lot of times we don't want to feel like we're doing a 180 change, like we don't want to lose ourselves or whatever. But if you don't adapt, if you don't compromise, or if you don't learn your spouse's communication style or your significant other's communication style, it's going to be really difficult for that relationship to grow. It's going to be hard. And as far as the love languages and learning how your spouse receives love, it's all about love. And so if you choose to say, you know what, I'll just keep loving them the way that I want to love them, it's not going to work out. It's not going to work out because you want to be appreciated and they want to feel appreciated. And without learning and having a better understanding of how they receive love and letting them know how you receive love, someone's going to always feel underappreciated. And so those are my lessons. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is the reason why we moved to the high desert. My husband finished his graduate program and he had gotten a job to be a school counselor. And so we moved up here. And in doing that, it was a totally new career path for him. He had dabbled in counseling as a school teacher, like a school teacher, but he had never actually done the job as a school counselor. And so it weighed on our marriage a little bit because of a little bit of frustration, a little bit of feeling like, you know, I'm here in this new career and I have all these new coworkers and those types of pressures. And at the same time, I started higher education. I started my master's program.
Right.
Those two pressures together really could have affected our marriage in a negative way. However, it did put pressure on our marriage, and we had to work really hard during that time. Sometimes not even sleeping because we're having all night conversations, and then he has to go to work and I have to go to school. And so the lesson that I have there is that you just need to be aware of where your spouse is, where your significant other is, like after you get married, especially if you haven't been living with them. And just be aware of those pressures, because if you are in a new marriage and then you guys are moving away from your in-laws and you're starting a new career or going to school or having a baby, all those things can be new pressures that you wouldn't normally have if you hadn't had all those things change at one time. And so you really need to just pay attention, slow down, and consider where you are in your life.
Yeah. And each one of those things brings a new pressure, right? Not even if you're not doing all of them at the same time, because we weren't doing kids yet, but all those things were mounting and adding. Like the thing that I learned in that was that if we can check in with each other, communicate, stay consistent, and don't get resentful, because there was nothing to be resentful about. I started a new career. I was making decent money, so we were making decent money.
Right.
So we were able to do the things that we needed to do. Bills were paid. We adjusted to the one time a month thing, but knowing that God will provide was huge for us, right? And that became a big deal for me as the husband, and in the back of my mind, always kind of running like I need to make sure that my wife is good and be a provider, make sure we have all these things, but knowing that that God would provide these things.
Right.
All I had to do was stay focused on Him and be consistent in the things that I was supposed to be doing. So those are my lessons. So that's all we have for this episode. Thank you for joining us on Love Intervention.
Right.
If you have not, hit the like button, that helps us out. Subscribe if you have not. Our subscriptions are going up. Thank you for those of you that are joining our group here, right? But please hit the like button. That helps us out on the YouTube. If you're on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, give us a good review. That would help us. That would help us out a lot. We appreciate it. All right. So that's it. That's all.
That's it. That's all. See you next time.